Yep.
I know it says it's going to take longer, but I refuse. Hi, everybody in the chat room. We're going to start the show in a couple minutes. We were dealing with a technology issue with Chicago, but we're all good, and we're up and going.
It's never ever going to happen again.
No, never ever. But unfortunately, people won't be able to hear the breaks and the music in and out for whatever reason, which I find curious. And but I'll work on it. I don't know why that is. It's just it's madness. Maybe there's take this guy. Maybe there's
I'm gonna smash that like.
I think that's a great idea. We should be coming back in a second. Hopefully I'll make sure. Oh, Chicago.
Oh, someone said, is it a HAL issue?
Oh, that's just... See, that's Chicago. Oh my gosh,
can you hear me?
that's us. Yes, I can indeed. We're here. We're rolling. Good morning. Is everybody in Chicago all right?
We're good.
Excellent. Right on. Welcome to the show, everybody. We're trying, new and creative ways of getting audio cleanly and fed to Chicago and back. And it's a curious endeavor sometimes, as I am in Las Vegas. Johnny is in Chicago. Our dear friend Philip Ittner will be joining us from Ukraine. He, like Malcolm Nance, is returning stateside, I think, starting next week or the week after. And that in and of itself will be an adventure, because I'm going to see if in that time period, depending on how long he's here, we can do an actual in-person meetup. What I do know about Philip is that he has, family in Michigan. There is a chance he will be traveling there, in which case I would make a special trip to Chicago, and we would, I guess, kidnap him and then take him to Chicago, and we could all be in studio in one fell swoop, and it'd be a lovely thing. And then we do a 9-hour live stream, much to the chagrin of Devin and everybody in Chicago.
Now, there's some talk about my shirt already. If you notice,
if people are on the live stream, this
is Flora.
Yeah,
I just got this. It was a surprise gift in the mail from a secret admirer.
Let me describe this for the people out in Radio Land. Remember, radio is the theater of the mind. Johnny Million is wearing a curiously floral button-down Hawaiian shirt style thing, which I don't want anyone to think is part of some sort of weird cult or some offshoot. Yeah, offshoot of the Ku Klux Klan or the Proud Boys or anything, because they try to do these meme clothing
so quickly.
It did terribly. And the one thing that we know will keep you out of the woods, because you get lost in the woods wearing that.
Yeah,
especially in the springtime. I suppose we'd be able to find you in the summer when everything's dry, but in the spring you'd be lost amongst the flowers. But on Johnny Million's floral shirt is his cat Flora, printed on the front and resting comfortably above his heart.
Yeah, she's got her RBF on there.
She does? Oh yes,
yeah.
Right. So this is now we're gonna have to up our game on the live stream clothing, and it's gonna be it's just gonna be a battle of attrition. Like
Somebody
next
asked
week,
if I got a new tattoo. I did.
Yes, and Johnny Million had it. Was lucky enough to. He's got one Rip Spider-Man tattoo on his left arm. He was able to go and get the other one. He was making an appointment to do it. I have unmarred skin of any sort. Hello. I'm a complete tabula rasa. I'm a blank slate, rare amongst my generation.
I have to inspect this on a semi-regular.
That's right.
basis.
Yeah. Yes. Because the Guinness Book people don't believe me, so they allow me one.
Trust me.
They allow me a visual spotter to come in. This is talk about this descalated quickly. Good morning, Johnny Million. I'm happy to be here with you, my friend. It has been yet another loony week of politics and craziness. I think one of the things, there are a couple of things that got brushed under the rug this week. With Patsy Baloney was, sat down, the former chief White House counsel, sat down yesterday with the January 6th committee for 8 hours.
Holy moly.
8 hours. Now, if had it been anybody but Patsy Baloney, it would have, I would have said that's a lot of pleading the fifth. But apparently, he has made some arrangement with elements of his discussions with the January 6th committee about where he believes as White House counsel, his duty to the president as far as executive privilege ends. Because in many ways, he would be the guy that would tell the president in moments, this won't cover our butts. If we start talking about this, you and I, the beloved Chicago actor Dennis Farina, who was in a myriad of movies, Midnight Run especially, where he's talking to his attorney in that movie, and the attorney's like, we can't do this, send an emissary, we'll get caught. Like, he's trying to keep the mob boss within the bounds of what legal, even gray area protection he can give him. And that's where Dennis tells him to sit down, have a bologna sandwich, and STFU. So in many ways, that seems to be the Trump plan as well. However, Patsy Baloney, sorry, I have to do that.
You had to.
The birth of that, of course, if people have been watching, is that Pat Cipollone, the former White House counsel, has a name that triggers closed caption, and it scrambles to find something. Yes. And there was Pat's Abalone. There was a there was a myriad of variations. And
Patsy Baloney, Pat's Abalone. I would like to see Pat's
people
Abalone.
in the chat room will know they've seen a bunch of these. This is and by the way, I don't want to miss. I think I just looked at the chat so we can bring this up, and our beloved HAL Vickery has been very supportive right out of the gate, it seems, today. And Lisa Miyamura, thank you as well for the super chat. You can support the show via super chat or become a Patreon supporter, patreon.com/HalSparks. We do this CPT show gratis, so any help is welcome. Even if it's as simple as going to infotainmentwars.com and subscribing to the YouTube channel. It requires no other effort than a minor click, and you do thousands of those a day. So, yes, there's a bunch of them coming up. Pasta bologna, passable only.
Oh, I like passable only.
Yeah, Pat's macaroni, Pat's abroni, Patsy Maloney.
Pets of belonging?
Pets of belonging was an actual one that showed up.
God.
Yes. All right. Now we're getting into the weird silliness. I mean, we do live in a simulation, and it has someone has hacked it and hooked up a silly algorithm to it. And so a lot of this stuff is coming up. So part pepperoni. Now you guys are just making them up. All right. Baba Baloney. This is not Howard Stern. Quit it. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about what what the biggest concern is for Trump in that stuff, and an even bigger nightmare for the Republicans happened this week, and it certainly wasn't TYT. We'll be back right after this. Patsy Baloney.
Amy Goodman reports on the news stories rarely covered.
Hold on. Chicago, can you
former Honduran?
Can you mute? Oh wait. There you go. Wait a minute. I think I've got it. Chicago.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yes. There you are.
Okay, cool. Okay,
But it creates. Hold on. It creates.
We were running into eCam.
Hold on. Yeah. Go ahead. Say again. Chicago.
Say again now.
That doesn't matter. You don't need a You don't need a camera. Huh. Yeah, for the time being, that'll work great.
Ever tried
okay.
peanut butter filled pretzels from Aldi?
Yeah, those are the thing. Those are it gives you the illusion of protein while snacking on
really
carbohydrates.
Attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the HAL Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with HAL Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. So this is it's an adventure in live audio mixing. I'm throwing down, but at least we're getting some of the audio through now to the live stream at fwank.com, FWANQ.com. That'll send you to the Twitch channel, and you can subscribe there if you're in our window of gamer boomer audience in the algorithm. No. So obviously the biggest nightmare for Fox News and Newsmax and Trump and all his argument is, of course, the jobs report that came out this week, which threw a monkey wrench in everybody's predictions, in their doomsaying. We added 375,000 jobs last month. It is 380,000. We were down 20,000 from the month before, but we are literally running out of people to hire. There are and the biggest complaint from Fox News this week, and it was beautiful. Like, if there's ever like a classic Fox News attempt to take dinner and turn it into excrement without actually ingesting it, Fox News complaint is all these open jobs. We have too many open jobs in the United States. Okay, let me explain something. When people have been fighting depressed wages for decades because there were not enough jobs and more people fighting for them, once you get too many jobs and not enough people, that's when wages start to go up to match, in many ways, what they should have been growing to slowly over time. So there's a shock to some of the economic system when it happens all at once, but it's not raising to a level that it's like, absurd and killing the currency, because the dollar is stronger than ever. Every single marker that the doomsayers are saying, while we are dealing, of course, along with the rest of the world, with post-COVID supply shock-related price increases in the CPI, it is not what we would say classical inflation. Never has been. There's an argument that most of the stories we've been telling about inflation in the country over the last 4 decades, maybe 5, have been really just CPI responses to a jackup in oil prices. If you want to go back and look, every time we've had a major economic problem in this country, the dot-com bubble might be the only one that doesn't qualify, but it didn't cascade or cause inflation. It was just a stock market related thing. But anywhere else that it actually affected consumer prices and the experience that the average person was having, it was always preceded the year before by a spike and a crash in oil prices. A weird ride of oil prices, largely revolving around an artificially high rise OPEC, the wars in the Middle East breaking out, driving the price up. And of course, right now, what we're going through with Russian oil being removed from the market and creating a situation where we've got less oil available. And Johnny, by the way, while we're doing this in the front, if you see any of the super chats, we want to be able to read those on air or say hi to anybody. If you see those going through, kind of like we do with them, be nice to bring those up if I miss them, just because it's blazing. Blazing. Nina Ruby, thank you so much. She sent us a sticker saying you're amazing, because you can send stickers on YouTube. It's lovely. It's like I've died and gone to preschool, but it's lovely. The biggest issue this week that they have is that this points towards the hawkish Fed, which is what everybody says, raising the interest rate by 75 basis points, which is 0.75%, aiming for the end of the year for interest rates to be around 3%. Now, back in when I was a kid, housing prices were a lot lower. You and me, Johnny Melly. Now when you were a kid, you were in, before we met at the age of 14, 15. So before that, you and I lived in distinctly different economic strata, especially in terms of real estate. Because, you lived in Northbrook or Field?
Northfield, yeah.
Field, yes. I always get them mixed up, unless I'm driving through them. Yeah. And the real estate values in Northfield versus the real estate values in Peaksmill, Kentucky, drastically different. I'm just going to say the amount of the inventory, the real estate inventory, and the investment property potential of both of those places, vastly different. And yet, one of the things they had in common was a correspondingly relatively high interest rate. Depending on when your parents bought that house or whatever, the interest rate was somewhere around 10, 12%, maybe even, I don't know if how far it goes back, maybe even 19% in crazy times. I mean,
it was like buying a house on a credit card.
Yeah. Right. And the irony is that it has effectively, the interest rate over time has crashed and real estate prices have gone up. And there is a balance to be had there, because the biggest investment people have. And if you can have a measured rise in the value of a home, that's how people build wealth over time. And that's a good thing. And so you want prices to go up as an investment over time to a certain extent. But the spike in them and the move in of investment, groups like BlackRock and others buying up houses and using them as rental properties have taken the inventory off the market, and so those prices continue to jack up. And the only people who can afford them are people who can walk in with cash and buy them outright. Mm-hmm. Even in a situation where interest rates are minuscule compared to what they were when you and I were kids. Oh, yeah. And so there's almost nothing a lot of people could do getting that first home unless they wanted to get it in a demilitarized zone, or it was the murder house on the block and nobody wants to move into it. It's like something out of a Pixar film about a house on the block kids won't go into. Or it's great, little lead paint, some asbestos, and the last owner was a lunatic who planted mines in the yard. Other than that, it's a unique fixer-upper opportunity, right? These are the only chance you have. Yeah. So as interest rates are starting to climb, we are seeing a clamoring on Fox Business, especially, about the American housing market is crashing. And by crashing, houses that were overpriced by $150,000 that by no means should get that much money are dropping their prices by $40,000, where they are still overpriced by $110,000.
So
and then they're selling.
Real estate crashing mean that the profiteers are struggling?
That's where I'm getting to. This is the beautiful part. And this is why you're going to see a lot of, we have to get Biden out of there now. His plan is going to destroy America. Now, why are there big specific interests? I mean, there's a lot of different groups that are hating on this dude, not just because he put the first black woman on the Supreme Court. There are a lot of people who have investments, let's say, that are going to be diminished slightly, not bad, but slightly by some of these policies. Now, what was the big change that happened that caused the crash that we're seeing as the Fed raises basis points and tries to normalize this balance between investment, your home value going up over time, so that eventually maybe when you retire, you sell it for a little bit more and you can add that to your Social Security and you got something to coast into the grave on, right? That's the old plan. So the profit margin on a rental house or property for most of these big companies per property is about 4.7%. And it's shaky ground. You got to deal with renters. Sometimes they come and go. Sometimes the property is empty. If you can't keep somebody in there consistently, that vacillates. That drops, down to 4%. So that's the decision they make. They buy these houses and they go, we're automatically going to make 4%, 4.7% profit on these things. And that's great. That's enough because most like Target retail stores make somewhere between 2.5 and 3% profit on stuff. I know everybody thinks it's 60% because they think the markup is the profit, but there's employees and buildings and zoning and taxes and blah, blah, and that. Okay, so that 4.7% number is now lower than the bond yield for long-term bonds for some of these as the interest rate goes up. And a bond, you don't have to worry about the renter wrecking the place. Nobody throws a party and burns down their bond. Nobody commits a crime in a bond that later on you can't sell it because nobody wants to live in the bond, in the murder bond. This is one of the big switches. And this is a tipping factor that in many ways the American real estate market has not seen in decades. And so investors are trying to get out of these properties that they were sure were going to give them 4.7%, and that was higher than they could get with bonds and other stuff, and that they were going to sell it at this exorbitant number because look at the market going up. And that's what creates a bubble. It's not people. It's not individuals. The tech bubble was not crashed by Robin Hood style investors deciding they thought it was fun to have GameStop stock. That's not how those things work. It's when these folks go in that have no interest in the actual use of any of these like substances, whether it's a stock, whether it's real estate. They're not going to live in the house. They're not even going to put a family member in the house. They're not buying a house for them and their kin and then their grandkids. They're buying it to rent or take off the market to raise the value of the other houses they own in the area. These kind of targeted things. And these are not, by the way, largely American investors. They are multinationals. They are largely overseas. And we got to take a break. And a bunch of them are Russian. And a bunch of them are Chinese. And all of a sudden, these Russian and Chinese millionaires who've been sneaking their money out of the country under the radar of their own tax system and their own legal system suddenly need that cash all of a sudden. And what did we get? I'll tell you right after we come back. Honestly, this is, I just am enjoying this. I'm just savoring this. We'll be back right after this.
People in the chat are saying that the CPT audio is bad.
Yes, it is. Well, that's because it's looping. So I have to take, CPT's audio, like going to CPT?
Apparently coming out of CPT.
Huh. That I can't say other than volume on there. Let's see. All right, I'm going to let me see. I'll bring down the audio a little bit volume wise, so we're not spiking. Maybe we're okay.
They said it sounds like bad
overmodulated.
Bad bit, right?
Well, that's certainly not the case on my end because ours is off the chart.
Thank you, Heather. Cal, 4-year-old son, Cal says, "Hi, Sparkle Man."
Aw, he loves live stream intro music. Oh, that's great. I wrote that in Logic. I was like trying to write a Fletch style theme song. So I can run around, sneaking around trying to find information to solve the story using no gun whatsoever. I just love how there's so much financial navel gazing in the United States because we are primarily the world economy. We are the prime mover of the world economy, even still, even as we pull out of the rest of the world, which we are doing. Raymond, thank you so much. How in the world did you get to be so damn smart? Well, don't ask Johnny because he and I spend a good deal of time being ne'er-do-wells in high school.
Yeah, by skipping classes in high school.
That's right. Yeah, I was actually skipping class when I found out I had been accepted into the funniest teenager in Chicago contest. I was actually ditching. Honestly, part of it, I have to say, was me. I dated a girl when I moved to LA who was going to Scripps College, this all-girl school out there. And all the girls out there are very bright. And I started reading her textbooks all the way through, because our dates would be far apart because it was a drive and my car was crap. So it'd be like a week and a half sometimes before we'd hang out for like 5 days, and then gas and work and stuff would keep us away, and then we'd go back, and then it became a regular thing. And during that time, I basically read all of her textbooks because I was like,
Wow.
I want to have something to talk about with her. And she's studying really hard. And I want to, if she's gone, what about this? And I'm like, maybe I can help. I'm not going to tutor you in a subject you're actually getting a degree in, but at least I can be a sounding board because I understand what you're talking about. And she was studying economics and and business marketing, which is basically how to BS your way through bad economic news. Hal's like a reverse Cartman. That's very sweet. I think. Chicago. Are you hearing me? Hold on. We've got Chicago. Yep. You there? I see Chicago coming in, but I don't hear you guys, and it's very strange. But hopefully, I can solve that. Just a moment.
Rob Glenn, thank you.
If we're live, just say yes, and we'll come back in. We are. Okay. I don't know why I can't hear them all of a sudden. That's very strange. Chicago, can we reconnect and maybe run another commercial break for you guys real quick? I'll just reload the page and see if that helps us. I don't know what that was. That's very strange. I think they're trying to help. The other link would have worked better, hopefully. Chicago, hey, can you hear me? Nope. There they are.
Look at that blue pretender. Thank you.
I don't know what that. Yeah. Sorry, they're trying to send us audio, and I can see that they're sending us audio. I just can't get it into my head. So that's something I can solve on this end. Apologies, but anyways, so we will continue to talk, and I'll operate as if breaks, if that's okay with you, Chicago, while I work on it on this end, because I have a lot to talk about, and I don't, if we're on air, that's cool. It's very sad. Okay, hold on. Welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, I will just do that as if live. And in the process of, looking at the economic news this week, the 380 jobs added, which goes against the standard belief currently that we are in any way, that we are headed into a recession, already in a recession, in a silent depression, in a silent recession, all that bad news that, that Fox is clamoring for before the midterms. Because what else you got? What else do you have? What else is there for them to run on in many ways? It's in effect a nightmare for them, primarily to try and run on Trump blathering about the election was stolen. Yeah, right. And they can't talk about the wins they just had because they are unfavorable to a large portion of the country.
They caught the dog caught the car, and everybody's
That's right.
mad about it.
And it does not benefit them in any way to tout it in a midterm, in a situation where they actually think it's going to be, they're not going to win any new voters that way. They're going to sever ties with the right-leaning independents, even that they enjoyed some support with during the Trump years over, because those folks are business-oriented Republicans,
Paul
I would
Newman
say.
listens to us? Wow. Paul Newman just gave us some euros.
Schmancy. Well, thanks, Paul. He's a sexy man, and I love doing Slapshot. And by the way, I hope I was a gentleman at your birthday party. I think I was. I didn't want to get up in your face and gush too much before you died. Right. So this is the idea that we are somehow in this isolated entity as the American economy anymore, and that the globalists just want us spread out all over the place. That storyline, whether it's Soros or the multinational corporations of the corporate Dems, whatever your boogeyman of choice is, the idea that they're trying to get us into the global economy or trying to make us a globalist society or whatever is silly. It's a silly idea. It's idiotic and boring and in many cases anti-Semitic and stupid, and it's basically how you can have your Alex Jones and sweat it too. And we are already integrated into the world economy, but not because we are necessarily reliant on it, but the other way around. They have been reliant on the U.S. economy forever as a stable currency. And we talked about this before with the idea that the BRIC countries are going to come up with their own crypto and agree on the value point on it. And what was the point that they were going to base it on? What was the value point they were going to base the BRIC Bitcoin that they were going to trade? We don't need the U.S. dollar anymore. What was it? They were going to peg it to the value of the U.S. dollar. I mean, seriously. Which means if, I see, HAL CPT board op engineering shut down the computer you connect with HAL SPARKS upon, restart it and watch this audio problem disappear 24 years. Yes, that might be it, Kenneth. I think you might be right. Sadly enough. Hopefully, we're working that through. And Chicago, okay, CPT has dropped off and is coming back, so hopefully they're reconnecting. Fingers crossed, we will make it happen. And I still haven't found. Let's see. Chrome. There we go. We need. I need to route this out. Okay. Use. Let's see. Okay. Chicago, I'm still not hearing you, but I hope you're hearing me, and I will continue speaking as if, and I will go to breaks on the quarter hour and act as if until we can get to the end of the hour and solve it for real. I trust we can do this. Okay, so again, not quite sure why this is being weird, but it's that audio issue that we ran into before in many ways. So hopefully we will be able to walk our way through this.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me, Johnny?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can't hear Hal, though.
No, no one can hear Hal.
It's odd. Okay, how about now? How about now?
Yes.
Yay, look at that.
Yes.
Chicago, hey, welcome back.
Hey, are you going to go in 20 seconds after a commercial?
That'd be lovely. I'll come back right after that. That should be all right.
Cool.
Okay, excellent. And then what we'll do is I'm going to send, let's see, turn this back on. And then I will go to here and I'm going to send that out. Here, check. Okay, good. And I'm going to send, hopefully Chicago, I can
Welcome back
check,
to the
check,
HAL
check,
SPARKS
check.
radio
There we go.
program, Mega Worldwide.
I think we fixed it. I mean, I was talking economics and scrambling to fix an audio issue at the same time. This reminds me of Albert Brooks in, I think it was in Network, was it? Where he's really aggravated that William Hurt is the anchor person because he's this handsome guy with blonde hair.
Broadcast
and
news.
he's sitting there and he's going, he's saying, I think, what was his, he was reading while listening to music and humming along with it. And in that, he was somehow, that was, let me see if I got, hold on. Do I have you, Johnny, in here? Hold on. I need,
I don't
now
think so.
No, there you are. Yeah, I hear you now. Okay, good.
Oh, okay. It's broadcast news.
Yeah, thank you. It was broadcast news where he's going, I can hum while I'm reading, which means he's really smart. That was one of the things. He was like, I can, if you can whistle and read at the same time and actually take in that's like next level thinking. So he's sort of bragging how smart he was because Hurt was this pretty dumb guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no switching channels, but it'll do. And if you haven't seen Switching Channels, that's Burt Reynolds and Christopher Reeve and what's her name? Turner. I'm blitzing on her name. Anyways, it's a comedy, basically higher comedy than that. It's basically we go network, broadcast news, then we go to Switching Channels, and listen just the conversation of Christopher Reeves talking about how he highlights his hair to add a certain kind of bronze to it because it wasn't too brassy. Is genius alone. So I mean, it's beautiful. Anyway, so we're back
him
on the air.
being blonde. Is that what that was for?
Yes, that's what it was. So in many ways, and it's hard. Listeners in Chicago, I apologize if I'm jumping into the middle of a conversation that we were having, and I'm just going to basically, if it's cool, Chicago, I'm going to go straight to the end of the hour since we sort of had an accidental break. If that's all right with you guys, we'll just ride it straight out so we can have an uninterrupted flow. Just let me know if that's cool. And the numbers coming out this week reflect a growing stability over time that will have fits and starts because it was so bent the other way, of wage growth for the American worker across the board, a stability of, sort of the job ladder in many ways, because of the pro-union movements by the Biden administration, and a recognition that we as a country can either have more kids or take in more immigrants for these jobs of the future that will be there by these job openings, instead of just even automation can't remove the jobs that need to be replaced. So people are being able to ask for a little bit more money. And the story that the Republicans have been telling for the last, God knows, I mean, forever, as long as I can remember, and I even arguably bought into it at one point, was this concept that the Fed prints money, and when there's too much money in the system, prices go up. And we dumped during COVID, we turned on the money printer and we brrred cash like one of those dollar bill guns all over the public. We made it rain on the populace.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're so flush. Try not to laugh. The public is so flush that
How flush are they?
Quit it. They're so flush they can wear tidy bowl as a hat. No, they're so flush. Like my buddy Murray Valeriano's, my favorite joke of his, I bought a toilet brush. I'm going back to paper. Those things itch. So They've been telling this money printing story. It's a good joke. They've been telling these money printing jokes for jokes. It is a joke. These stories for so long that people have essentially bought it. And the irony of it is that while there was a certain amount of liquidity injected into people's bank accounts during COVID directly, it, like all direct resource-based payments, went right into the system again. It bought groceries. Some people saved it. Some people paid off debt. But people are like, that's not a useful use of stimulus. Well, yes, it is if you're not using UI for it, for example. So you can balance that payment and not go, well, now I've got money coming in, but I've got to pay this, or my phone's going to get shut off, or I'm going to lose my credit card, which is how I shuffle payments sometimes, or I'm going to lose the rotating loan my business has. And small businesses that were smaller than some household incomes could get enormous loans, and some households that had bigger debt than those, as they were putting kids through college when this stuff happened, and they leveraged it against the future is steady and relatively bright, and then this thing happened, they were suddenly on their heels. So this money that flowed into the system didn't magically just, they didn't just sit on it like Scrooge McDuck, just throwing it into the air, going, or start wiping their nose with it like the end of Dumb and Dumber. Remember when they're crying watching commercials?
Yeah.
Right? The people used it for the things they needed. And it went right back to this. And it made, by the way, a lot of the billionaires you're hearing about, it made some of those billionaires that made a lot of money. One of the ways that they made it was twofold. The biggest one, obviously, was Jeff Bezos and Amazon and delivery systems, Postmates, Grubhub, all those things, because they were uniquely suited to a circumstance we found ourselves in. And in many ways, they will be an ongoing element of American life forever. Home delivery, people are enjoying that part. But as we've come back, retail is opening at fits and starts. And where are the jobs that they can't fill? In stores, because people want to go to those stores, but not necessarily work in those stores. So there's a balance being made in what you pay for people in those stores. And this is a balance that should have been played out slowly and incrementally since, 1990. But business pressure and, quite frankly, Democrat and left-leaning solutions that sort of balanced it out, because there was intransigence on the Republican Party. You can't let people starve, so you got to solve it with other elements, economic support in other areas, especially for people below the poverty level, or raising the poverty level and increasing it over time instead of allowing that wage growth. There's many ways, like the story you used to hear about how people didn't get wages, but they got credit. Credit started booming in the 90s. And it took the pressure off of business to raise people's incomes, because they didn't necessarily need cash on hand to buy the creature comforts that they were seeing and wanting. And then payments on phones and those kind of things over time, or the rotating of getting phones, which is one of your biggest, non-house, non-car investments these days, was spread out over the cost of your house, over the cost of your phone and your plan, essentially. So each of these elements kind of in their own way caused like a positive depleting of wages over time. But because there weren't these jobs available and you didn't have a choice, if you needed the job more than they needed you. And we're in a unique situation because, and it's interesting to me that the Republicans don't seem to notice this. We lost over 500,000 Americans in a year. And a lot of those people weren't retirees. A lot of them were holding positions. They were working in the world. And many of them had family members that were traumatized by this. And this cascade effect that happened through the economy that took people out of the workforce, or not to mention the possibility that long COVID has an actual material statistical impact. All of those factors have left, and the growth of the economy, this, Biden reshoring factories at the fastest clip in American history, has put us in a situation where there's more jobs than people.
Oopsies.
And for investment-oriented business, for regular business, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you're going to be paying more, so you can expect more from your workers in that regard as far as quality, even at the mid-level. And so they know this, and people kind of show up and like, wow, I'm making this money sounds right to me. This is something I can use. And this transitory inflation, which we are experiencing as a year-over-year problem, is going to stabilize. It is, as it always has. It's not going to. We're not going to Venezuela. They didn't turn on the money printers. That is a ghost story they're telling people. And as it stabilizes, the wages are going to stay. You're not going to take a cut in pay of that 5.1% wage growth that we saw last month, which is, long overdue and not extraordinary and not in any way an example of, oh my God, people's wages had to go up 35% just to get people to work, because UI was still being like that. The story being told on Fox News is so comically over the top that this week, when the jobs report came out, when they must have like an anything to hide Biden's successes war room. I mean, they're still talking about Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah. In the middle of all of this, Wes Webb is giving away HAL Sparks memberships left and right.
Oh, thank you so much, Wes. That's fantastic. Wes, that's lovely. His only money, thank my dead dad. Oh, good Lord, Wes. Thank you so much, brother.
Attaboy.
I'm after all these audio issues, I was momentarily speechless on an organic level. Thanks, Wes. And thanks everybody who supports the show. Our patrons, we wouldn't be able to, next week, I will be in Cleveland doing the show. And then I'll be doing my live stream in Cleveland and Kentucky as I'm traveling with family, taking my, as we take our kid on the grandparents tour and the cousins tour, which we have to do, we do every summer. We don't have to. We do it because we love it and he loves it and we want to be there. But in that process, I pull this whole rig together and make and duct tape everything together and make it work. And God bless the long-suffering CPT for dealing with me in those things. But it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for our patrons jumping in early in the show and helping us stay in existence because of COVID. And this is another example of that collapse, that falling apart that everybody experienced at the same time. The money printing story is sort of I would say, it's the Republican Party and those kind of economic theorists, the people who, business over humans crowd, that this is their way of saying, being angry about the bailouts. Like when Democrats were angry that some banks were giving bonuses and people were getting bailed out, during the 2008 crash and too big to fail, all that kind of stuff. You can remember the anger you had about that, and you were like, this seems weird. Why wouldn't you help people directly and not these institutions? Exactly. Now, there's an argument to keep those institutions floating because they don't just keep our economy afloat. They also keep the economies of many other nations afloat. And whereas we might be able to inject money directly into the accounts of human beings, they won't. And so if all of our financial institutions collapsed, people starve to death in other countries. It's that connected. So there's a reason for keeping those things up. That said, that anger about the bonuses and all that kind of stuff that people felt, that's basically how the Republicans feel about the idea that people got extended unemployment insurance during a pandemic when no one could work and there was no clear way out. When we didn't even have a vaccine yet. They didn't have, halfway through the first month trial, they're like, I don't know why people aren't just making out in public. There's a distinction between the idea that there's too much liquidity in the market and therefore inflation is caused by the American consumer and what's the reality of the world. And what's happening in the world right now, I'm looking at the clock, so I make sure, because I'm totally off the zone of it. The reality of the world is that companies and countries that pay bonds, pay like interest payments, or on debt that they have taken from other people and from the United States, they do it in U.S. currency. They do it in dollars. And there aren't enough of them for them to make their bond payments. They are scrambling to get U.S. dollars because nobody wants anything else. They don't like, even euros aren't a backup. The only thing that isn't running on the U.S. dollar right now is the Chinese real estate market, which is worse than 2008 and is going to have a cascading effect across that economy that none of us can fathom. And ironically, in a time when China decided to isolate itself, remember all the clamors like we should just get out of the world and stop globalizing and move inside. It's almost as if they were quoting the CCP's business model, because that's what China has been doing over the last 10 years. They have been removing themselves from the rest of the world. A lot of the techno theft that they've been accused of is not because they're going to steal your camera or your computer ID or whatever and sell it on the market. They're just going to steal it and sell it inside the country. Just have all that stuff. Just develop, they don't just assemble it there, steal the plans, build it there. And then when they shut off their economy, they'll just use the stuff. Because at a certain point, AI will do most of the programming. It'll improve on itself. That's the theory. But they did it too soon. And it's a nightmare scenario for them. And it's what Republicans in many ways have been asking for this entire time. And the irony is that it didn't play out that way. And they're panicking, not because we're not going through the same difficult situation that all these, they're panicking because their predictions aren't playing out in a timely fashion for the midterms.
Right.
And so get ready for 2 months of Hunter Biden and the election was stolen, because they don't want to talk about the fact that if Democrats get 2 more senators, we can codify Roe v. Wade. If Democrats get 2 more senators and maintain our and expand, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to expand our numbers in the House. We can codify Roe v. Wade. We can actually get a version of at least the pieces of Build Back Better through on reconciliation, individual parts of it, not the whole of it. That's got to be the goal. We'll be back right after this. It's the HAL Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Joining us next hour is Philip Ittner, live from Ukraine. I think he popped in for a second and then he popped out, so we'll get him over the course of the break. And by the way, bless Chicago and their long-suffering dealing with the tech audio issues this morning. I adore you. I love you, and I want to have your babies. We'll be back.
We love you too.
And let's see. And let's see if I can bring Philip in, if I can bring the proper screens up. I have so
the
many.
420 God has already killed Philip in their mind.
How's that? Oh. Hold on 1 second. Let me move
Just
this.
declared him dead because he wasn't on before.
Oh, I
noon.
see. Right. That's the, let's see. 3 up. Here we go. This is it. Weep. And I got to move him in. And we'll go to here. And then he joins us. And then, ta-da! There he is.
There we go. Hello.
Ah, there he is.
Looking good for a dead person.
Right. The ghost of Kiev. The Spectre. I would prefer to call you the Spectre.
Sure.
I'm just saying that, Philip, you have the look of a man who would look fabulous in a long cowl with a big hood at any time in history, who shows up just in time to predict the future, just dropping the hood. I'm just saying, it's a look.
Maybe
and you can work
even
it.
like saying some executions.
There's like a million people crying out at once, and then what's the line?
Yeah.
What's the Obi-Wan
Right.
Kenobi line about
Finish
blowing up Alderaan?
Yes, Alderaan.
Crying out all at once.
That's
and
no
then suddenly
moon.
silent.
Yes. It's no use, Luke. If you'd have been there, you'd have been killed too. And the droids would now be in the hands of the Empire. Welcome, everybody. Everybody's saying hi, Philip, in there. There's so much U.S. news and we had an audio issue in the beginning of the show that I didn't even get to like all the stuff we were going to talk about. So I might incorporate you some in what we're chatting about in that regard. Yep, there we go. And sorry, I'm catching up on all the texts where they're like, I can't hear you. Right.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Because one of them deals with like MTG is trying to out Jimmy Dore, the Jacobin. Like they are. It's amazing to me. Jimmy Dore literally declared this week that Ukraine is a failed state.
Yeah, I saw that.
Wow.
And I saw MTG's tweets, and I've seen all the various. I won't even mention who they are, but I do. I look into stuff on both sides of the equation, and there are a lot of people who are towing the Kremlin line.
It's amazing,
Dore,
word for word.
Dore put that out. It was just, and I'm in Kiev.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not a functioning government. It's collapsed. I mean, there are pensioners who are getting their pension.
Right.
There's police on the street. There are traffic wardens. The place is functioning. It's just
it's goofy. They're delivering grain as best they can. They're coming up with other ways. They're literally in the process of refitting track or trying to modify train cars so they can take the volume of grain out without having to change the gauge of track that goes out, because industrial track is different than passenger track, and
also European Union tracks are different than post-Soviet sphere.
Yes,
and that was done on purpose.
Right. So the Soviets wanted it to end at their border, essentially. Right.
That's right. That's right. Dore and MTG and all these people who are rooting the Russians, hoping for the Russians to win.
Yes.
I know that it can be lucrative. I know that the Russians love it and they support it. And I'm not, I don't know if Johnny gets any money from, I'm sure he's got a lot of people at the
the super
Internet
chats
Bureau.
Oh, the
the super chats and the bots and all the.
It's the cheapest date. It's the cheapest date in town.
Yeah,
it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and then there are those who are actually fellow travelers.
Yes,
and
who actually buy it
and who believe in Russia's kind of the West is there's nothing good in the West, and they're all a bunch of naive pawns of the evil capitalist,
right.
The Americans, and there's no compassion, there's no rule of law, they lie all the time, and they're hypocrites, and
right.
That feeds. There's an active audience for that in the West, and I myself have in the past struggled with this concept that the Russians, this worldview that the Russians put forward,
right?
And they have done for. Well, I mean, I used to argue about this when I lived in Moscow in the late '90s.
Mm-hmm.
That we like to talk a good game about liberal democracy and the rule of law and all these kind of things, but when push comes to shove, you're just as brutal as we are. There is no law is only a thin little pretense that you put on when you want to, sort of thing.
Right.
To which I struggled with for many years until I came to the realization that it is flawed. It is absolutely 100% flawed. But at least we're trying to make it better. And what the Russians would have us do would just be wallow in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
Just accept for the fact that might makes right, and that all there is.
The argument I would,
the
clear difference I would say is that I participated in protests against the Iraq War. I voted for someone who was against it. And once we were quagmired in both of those countries, getting out was a lot of work. But the goal was vote every time for someone who was going to get us out. And that was the process, and not start this kind of stuff again. And the awareness that had Al Gore gotten in and 9/11 9/11 actually happened, which there's a question of whether it would have because of different management deals with different things. He would have read the PDB. They would have paid attention. They would have been better at the helm. That in doing those things, it mattered. And we changed presidents. We can do it. They don't. And they have no interest in doing it. And Donald Trump himself is like, I should be president again, and they owe me another term because they were messing with me the whole first term, and I should be able to pass a law to stay in forever. Wouldn't that be great? Trump 2025. And they would remember the joke they did about like every year he was going to be president, that meme that he was floating for a while that he thought was awesome about staying in power forever.
Yeah.
By the way, Chicago, are we back? Are we there? Hold on. I want to make sure I'm not missing something. And of course. We should be, and then I've got the same audio issue again with them. I'm losing their feed through. We'll fix it. We'll work on it. Don't on. Let's see if this does it. We're back. Welcome to the show. I'm House. This is Mega World. If we're good, we're good. Keep going. Right. That's one of the hardness. I don't know why that shit was happening with them input today. About that, guys. But I will say on the live's pretty good. So if you need it from the live stream, you'll get there, and I will go to Chicago, just so you know. So in this back to the show, Utner is joining us, Kiev, Rome. And John Million right in the cat tree. And so we're definitely worldwide these days. And in this particular,
we're super too.
We're what? Sorry?
This is very, very right now.
Johnny, how do I sound?
You sound okay to me.
Good, and then I'm back. And
then let me answer. Maybe I'll answer a question or two.
We're better because I fixed it. I think we're good, Chicago. So beg your pardon.
You're okay.
Yep, piece by piece. So welcome back. So Philip Ittner is in Kiev with us right now. We've got questions from our chat room as per usual. And Jimmy the Geek says, "Hal, stop pushing buttons. It's the only way I could get us on." I'm the Wizard of Oz right now. Just pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's good advice.
Told me to share with you. Don't mess with it too much, Hal.
I will say for the record that I mess with it just enough. You can be heard. I can be heard. They can be heard, and Chicago can hear us. That is just enough. All right. So, there's a lot of questions that I have this week. One of the biggest stories out of Ukraine this week, and we were talking during the break, of the hilarity of MTG basically saying we need to stop being a part of NATO, essentially, and Europe's not our problem, and our engagement with them is not. That doesn't help the average American, and I mean the absurdity of it is on its face. It's just goofy. She's falling back in many of her other statements. The stuff that's so nuts that people miss the QAnon level stuff she was saying, which she used to say before she got elected, and now she's just back on 100%, well, 80%, I would say, because she's still slightly aware that some things are third rails. Jimmy Dore, formerly of TYT and currently of the voting sucks, don't do it left. It's the best way to fix things is to let the Republicans destroy it crowd. Which, by the way, Anna Kasparian from TYT has joined fully. I can't wait for their spinoff show. Madness ensues. But Jimmy Dore declared, as a voice of the left, that Ukraine is a failed state. That's a direct quote. Not that it's losing the war, not that it because it lost Lysychansk, however temporarily. Like they lost Kharkiv and got it back, which is a much bigger city, or as they're gaining Kherson, for example, which are giant, meaningful cities, that by bogging down the Russians in Severodonetsk and then pulling back out of Lysychansk and drawing this power out, that the Russians are literally low on humans at this point. It's been admitted by the Russians themselves just from that process to effectively, strategically take Toledo. That's the best.
Yeah, the entire Donbass is roughly the size of Yellowstone Park.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the entire Donbass.
Right.
And it's taken them 4.5, almost 5 months to take it, if you include, since February 24th. If you want to even be generous and say, since they focused on solely the Donbass and pulled away from the capital.
Yeah, right.
That's
Since they lost
like 2 months.
their other stuff. Yeah.
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 And they weren't able to take Yellowstone Park.
Right.
And you're right. They are running low on running low on manpower to the extent that there are widespread reports of
Yes.
Wagner Group, this kind of
Wagner Group,
paramilitary mercenary group that's funded by the Kremlin. It's kind of supported by the Kremlin,
Wagner.
going into prisons
Yes.
in
Oh,
St.
God.
Petersburg and offering amnesty and meager pay to Russian prisoners if they will go and fight in the war. I mean, if they're doing that, those reports are true, and there are several reports of them doing this.
The enemy of my enemy
would you
is
do
cannon
that?
fodder, I guess.
Yeah, and why would you do that if everything was going fine? You wouldn't. So it's
Right.
well, is it Wagner or Wagner?
It's Wagner. I call
it's
it Wagner.
but
It's named after I'm trying to train the media. You know, the big conversation we had about Kiev versus Kyiv and all that conversation. I would like. I think there's a way more meaningful conversation to be had about the Wagner Group because it's named after Hitler's favorite composer.
Oh boy.
It's not
who wrote Das Spectre, Zarathustra, and
Yeah,
Ride
right.
of the Valkyries.
Yes. So specifically, I mean, they want to say Wagner because it sounds very like, again, I will not lay this at Robert Wagner's feet. I am too big a heart-to-heart fan. But yeah, so anyway, we've got some questions from the chat already.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
we'll get to one before
Some
we
people ask questions 5 minutes after we start, like an hour before Phil even shows up.
Right.
Oh God.
That's okay.
So-
It's good because we're starting to load them in, right?
All right,
This
let's
is from
do it.
Ed's
Let's do
3D
it.
Tech. Is the Russian, we kind of touched on this, is the Russian army running low on ammo?
They're certainly going through it. Some 60,000 rounds a day, apparently, according to former President
Right.
Petro Poroshenko. And they're clearly having to adjust because they're using munitions that aren't intended for what they're doing. I keep going back to the Kremenchuk shopping mall when they shot at it with an anti-ship missile. You know, you don't use ordnance like that against a shopping center, against a land-based target,
They're
a
evasive,
land-based target, unless you're running low on
Once you
ammunition.
spook a
There's
shopping
something up.
center, it's hard to track down.
That's right. Yes, it was
Yeah.
it was the world's first floating
Even
shopping
harder
center.
to sink.
The other, I mean, there's been a lot of talk. The politics of Belarus, I think, are one of the more difficult things to understand in this. And this new push, there's this weird anti-Poland thing that's been coming up in the last few weeks in particular that I think could deserve a quick dive at some point. Let's take a break real quick, and we're going to come back
Sure.
after this break. And that might be that's my point of privilege question, because first of all, I'm sure it's centuries deep, but also acute to World War II, and still some people alive and chafing from territory they thought Poland didn't deserve. Just like Finland. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the HAL Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. And Chicago, yeah, all right.
You're on break. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, cool.
Well, you must be doing something right, Hal, because I'm seeing more and more Russian trolls in your chat.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get them. Yeah, and I'm very proud. Here's let's see. I'm you've got Volkswagen, right? Yeah, Volkswagen is actually where the word "folks" comes from.
Yeah,
and folks has folks as a people has a very like socialist anti.
I get weird. I get weird when
Yeah.
we talk about stuff like this because I'm also like of two camps on it. Because I mean, we call that city in Germany Munich, whereas the Germans themselves call it München.
Right.
I mean, when you transliterate things, sometimes you kind of adapt it into your own language.
Sure.
So
I've always
I'm
found
not really put out
and by the way,
Wagner.
the other thing too is I call it Wagner because I like it as a constant reminder that it was named
Back
after
in
Hitler's
20.
favorite composer. That's the important part.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that matters about it. And
I
Midas
do
Sue
love Ride
says,
of the Valkyries, though. It's a great tune.
Yes, it's true. Midas Sue, his capabilities as a composer are not in question. Midas Sue, thank you for the super chat for the Russian trolls who have joined us, welcoming them in and helping us spread the message of the show.
Into the HAL Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Love that I can actually hear. Welcome back to the show. I'm so happy when I can just hear the regular break music and it's almost like we're back to normal production. It's so lovely.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm just going to chalk these up to attacks by Russian trolls on technology. I mean, they do it if they could, so why not? You know,
I mean,
I'm just going to leave it at that. I mean, it's not out of the question.
There's an entire military division that does nothing but disrupt.
That's right. Well, it's not like they can build anything. What are you going to do? Buy a Russian VPN? Or like my favorite thing was there was Russian security software, the most singular software that was used that came from Russia.
Kaspersky.
Yes, was this Russian security software, which is just goofy. Like of all places, it's like it's like the question of Chinese CCTV cameras having the ability to whatever network you're on also send signal to whoever made it. You know, that was the idea. They found a bunch of chips in these cameras that were being made where if you put up this particular brand of Chinese camera, that anybody who set up a relay in China could just look at those cameras anywhere in the world. Yeah. We didn't use them a lot. A lot of the images came back from UK who were buying them hand over fist because there's more cameras in the UK than anywhere on earth per capita. China has more in general and Russia is a close second, but human to human, the UK has fewer. Anyways, we got more questions in that, but I wanted to touch on sort of the Poland aspect of this.
You want to talk a little bit about Poland?
Yeah, because Lukashenko and the whole will Belarus be a puppet? Are they currently being a puppet state of Russia functionally, or is he trying to pull away? Is he looking to overtake Putin? That kind of general politics. Part of what's come out of that is this weird element of Belarus being, bordered or close to Poland and their issues with, the Kaliningrad issue and them being a satellite state that is effectively what Putin would want at best for Ukraine. At worst, he might do worse to Belarus after he's done. But the Polish issue is the one that confuses me the most geopolitically. Why they still care or what the power play is there, they think.
You mean the Russision narrative that they're trying to put out that Poland is going to come and try and take back Lviv?
Right.
Well, I mean, that's because they're playing on the divisions within Ukrainian society. And they are also, I think, really lost in the previous century. They still think that it's Napoleonic,
right.
land grabs and things like that. And eventually
Germanic tribes fighting over the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Trying to take back. But but I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and it's important for everybody to remember. The stretch of land between the Adriatic and the Black Sea has been this stretch of territory, and then if you also include up to the North Sea with the Baltic states, that whole section of this whole section of Europe has been fought over for centuries, and it's been passed back and forth, and it's the people who come through here and they've tried to conquer it for their own imperial purposes, and because of the disruption for so many centuries throughout the 20th century and now into the 21st, the discussion of who owns this territory has caused both the First, the Second, and the Second World War. Mm-hmm. The First World War, it was the breakup of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and their satellite states trying to be free, and then in the world, them trying to grab Poland and divide up Poland, and this is the last stretch of land that is even remotely contested. this country. This is probably the longest period of self-determination that Ukraine has had since like the 16th century.
Right.
They had a couple of brief windows in the 20th century. They've had an independence movement for the better part of 2 centuries. But this country called Ukraine is kind of an anomaly, and it's not something that's existed before. And so the Russians, and because it's kind of a hodgepodge of
groups and
territories, as
right.
those empires came through, they left their own residual kind of communities. And so this has been a disparate country, Ukraine. And the Russians have tried to stress on those divisions. It's not working, though. And
right.
So I think that's why they're doing this
even in the United States, like
East Galicia thing.
The irony is that the separatist region that they would want to focus on in the United States in particular, and the noise we've heard about it in Texas with the Texas GOP's platform, that they need to vote on secession, which would be a very disappointing vote for them, I think they would find, and a very embarrassing moment that would actually drive that state more purple than it is. One of the reasons why Russia's had less effect in doing that is that the secession from geographically of Texas would make it its own country between the United States and Mexico after having shunned the United States. So its option as far as its own land security, if you looked at it as a state in and of itself, would be whatever resources they can come up with on their own as quickly as possible, while they get overrun by Mexican drug cartels. Like the Russians have been trying to support separatist movements around the West for at least the last decade and a half. They have every year they have an event in Moscow, and they invite separatist guys from all around the world, whether it's the Catalans in Spain or the Basque community, or even, they invite, free Californians, Californian free staters or Texas or, whatever, because they're looking to break us up. But what I find interesting is that, of course, they invite all the separatists movement, and the whole conference that happens annually probably won't happen again this year, but normally happens annually. Right.
The whole purposes of it is like, these little republics should have self-determination and not live under the thumb of these despotic Western powers. They never, however, invite, say, the Dagestanis, the Ingush, the Ossetians, the Yakutians,
the Chechens, the Georgians, in that area.
Interestingly enough, they're not really as open-minded when it comes to their own republic.
Again, this is anytime someone is selling you on the idea of single-sided hegemony in the world, that there is one country that is behind all the hegemony in the world, they are more than likely aligned with another country seeking their own hegemony. And in this particular case, that's been the battle east and west between Russia and the U.S. for a long time, as far as a battle of words and propaganda and stories. And the same thing happened to some degree with the CCP under Xi Jinping, is this idea that we got to stop this whole one state America thing where they run everything, which isn't how the world works. But that's the illusion for a long time. Not ironically enough, so that there isn't one country running the whole thing, but so that they can be the dominant force. And Russia's doing it the same game plan, has for years. And that's why I would argue that the 1991 collapse was actually a rope-a-dope, if you really look at it strategically from a chess standpoint. That said, they're not going to be able to do it. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't maintain this, because that requires a tremendous amount of creative endeavor. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of buildup. And even China in the BRI, which is where they were trying a different tack on this, they needed to associate it with, one hand is a debt trap, and the other hand is, we're going to give you a bunch of money to build a bunch of bridges, but you got to use these Chinese companies to do it. And we're going to bring in our own workers to do it. So we're just using your land to keep our workers busy, because idle hands are the devil's workshop, and we've got too many people. And the minute they realize they're screwed, we're in trouble. So we got to ship them off to other countries. In many ways, it's what Cuba does with their doctors in Latin America. they make a lot of money there and they can send it back to their family. So it becomes this cycle where they're effectively enslaving their doctors in some ways, but using this sort of puffery that isn't that nice what we're doing for other people. So anyways, let's we got 3 minutes before the break. Let's grab a question from the chat.
Question? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's one that has been asked by a couple different people. Is there any update on Putin's health?
On Putin's health? No,
Yes.
no update. No update, and he has been looking better. There are those out there who say. I mean, I hate to quote him, but Oliver Stone
Right.
recently saying that yes, he did have cancer, but he licked it. In Stone's words. I mean, Oliver Stone is I don't.
Oh man,
they're not a reliable source. But Putin, he just delivered this address to the Duma, and he looked okay. He was still spewing nonsense, but he looked okay.
He's still puffy, but they're definitely working on him. They're and they're also giving him breaks between stuff. Part of that also is just the beginning of this war. I have no doubt that he was up at all hours and running himself ragged while he's still got these problems. So on top of that, everybody will be a little tired and bagged out, as these things go along. I will say that for the record, one of the recurring characteristics of Oliver Stone was that famously, I think it was during JFK, that on set he would just whip out his crank and pee on set instead of going to the bathroom in front of crew. All of whom, by the way, aren't men, and all of whom, even when they are men, aren't cool with seeing the director's crank whenever he decides to dangle it in front of everybody. He also preemptively did this big Putin interview where he followed the dude around and went, "You're kind of awesome. Why does the world think you're not awesome?"
Yeah, he has a love affair with Putin.
It's
Absolutely.
really, and especially considering his sort of, and maybe it's in line with it. Maybe this is the worst of the McCarthyistic fever dreams of commies among us and the Red Scare, having a point to it in some corners. 20% truth, but 80% garbage. The 20% truth might be the fact that Oliver Stone's been one of these guys who's like, nonstop the whole world. Like the U.S. is the problem. Our Western society, natural born killers. The JFK assassination, our government is a failed state. It's crap. All of it lines up to point.
Russia knows that, and it speaks to that audience, whether it's Stone, whether it is Jimmy Dore, whether it's MTG, whether it's all sorts of different people. They know exactly how to get inside our heads, gaslight us, and be like, no, the problem is America. Everything's bad with it. That's the only problem. If we could just, break up America, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, it would reset to a weird, puffy utopia. Yeah.
They attack us knowing the weaknesses that we have and the dissatisfaction that people have with the American experiment, like Stone, and they just ramp it right up, and it feeds right into their.
We got to take a break, which I would argue, though, again, is kind of like the burning of the American flag. The burning of the American flag shows that people are not happy about the state of America when they do it. But the fact that you can burn the American flag is why it's so worthwhile. Burning the American flag, it's like striking down Obi-Wan. If you burn it, you make it stronger because one of the things it stands for is your ability to burn it. And people who try to outlaw people who try to outlaw the burning of the flag are people who diminish its worth more than the people who burn it. And the people like Oliver Stone who will crap all over America prove its worth as a country because they're able to do it. Because he's able to make any movie he makes and say whatever he wants and do any interviews he wants. And the government never comes for him. And the government that he's puffing up, in this case, Vladimir Putin's, would never allow that and is currently engaged in stopping that violently. So we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the HAL Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Follow at Philip Ittner, 1L, 2Ts on Twitter, and check out his vlog on YouTube that he's doing from Ukraine with great regularity. And he also joins us here and on the live stream on Wednesdays for a bit, anyways, until he comes stateside. We'll be back right after this. Yes. Didn't Oliver Stone make that stupid debunked JFK assassination movie? Oh, and since he's peeing in front of his friends, offensive, really? Yeah, right. Mumbles prudes, right. I haven't seen a prednisone. Yeah, like the prof's pretty sure. I agree too that like they're jacking him up on prednisone. It's one of the issues that quite frankly, and these parallels are too oft made, but that Hitler had this dude running around jacking him full of B vitamins and and their equivalent of prednisone at the time, like these wonder juices, which was gonna make his system collapse, but maybe not for a couple of years. It can keep you on your feet artificially, but the come down is really bad.
Well, he's definitely either currently ill or he has just gone through an illness. I don't know, but
right.
It's not something is not right for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe the trolls know. I mean, they've met him personally. They've spent time together. They go to his 24.
Boy, they really.
His 30.
They are, as I say, you must be doing something right. Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming here.
Yeah. Why? I mean, obviously, they saw that I did a video about Jimmy Dore and TY's attack on democracy, and so obviously, I'm not part of the plan. I mean, it's nice. It's a good sign. And by the way, they accidentally broaden us into the algorithm, so it helps. And they also don't understand that my chat doesn't get upset.
That the audio is bad right now. And
okay.
What's the hardest food staple to get a hold of? Mexican food, but that's cultural, not food stuff.
Hold on. Say again, Johnny.
Not newcomer.
The CPT is saying that the audio is bad, and they're trying to talk to you, but you can't hear them.
Oh, we're back to that again?
Apparently.
Why does that loop back through that? Hold on 1 second. I will try and fix that. We're in break, hopefully, so let me do that. Back up. I've been trying to use Chicago. Is that better? Can you hear me? Oh, hold on. Chicago virtual. There we go. Check, check, check. Hold on. Chicago. Oops, hold on. Chicago. Check, check, check. There we go. Chicago, can you hear me now? You good?
Way better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
way better. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Next time we'll use the eCam throughput. We'll try to set that up. Even if you just have a webcam pointed down at the desk, just plugged into one of the computers, doesn't really matter. That'll help us get through there because the audio will be more consistent that way and less apt to be attacked. I'm just saying.
Well, are there people in the chat who are urging me to go to the front lines? Yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
Right.
We're back at 20.
Thank you.
I've been shot at enough in my life. I don't need any more.
Right. Tony Mayo says you guys are great. Long live Ukraine. Hitler made Keith Richards look like a casual user, says PHK. Send in the trolls.
This is Damian Perdue of Think Theory Radio. Saturdays at 6 p.m. You're listening to HAL Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. HAL Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
We're back with our dear friend Philip Ittner. He's live in Ukraine right now. And Johnny Million, of course, going through the questions in the chat room for him. I would take calls and try to institute that in the future, but I would rather solve all my other audio issues before we try to jump that shark. So what's the next one up, Johnny, in the stack?
I got one from
Connie Kelly. Before we go on to that, actually, quickly before we go on to that, I've already announced that at some point I'm going to be coming back to the States.
Right.
I have some obligations that I need to take care of in California and in Michigan. So I am going to come back. And when I'm back in the States, I'm going to get some new equipment. I'm going to get, maybe I need a new laptop, for example, and a couple other things. And I'll try and get down to LA so that we can sit, across from one another. But we can definitely talk more about, streamlining this and making this work better for everybody.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Anyhow, okay, so onward to the questions.
Yeah, I've got one from Connie Kelly. They're asking, why were the Russians allowed to bomb Snake Island? Why didn't they take out the planes?
So
why didn't the Ukrainians take out the planes that were bombing Snake Island. Do I understand that correctly?
All I see is, why were the Russians allowed to bomb Snake Island? Why didn't they take out the planes?
Well, it's my understanding they may have actually used drones to do that.
Yes.
And they're very difficult. Especially, look, they're increasingly in this war. Both sides are starting to develop electronic countermeasures to knock drones out of the sky. But because Snake Island is out in the middle of the Black Sea, I don't think that they were able to employ any kind of system to knock the drones down. So they flew over. What's interesting to me about that whole thing is not why didn't they shoot them down, but rather why did the Russians feel the need to do it if it was if it was a peaceful withdrawal from Snake Island?
Yeah, that was the fun. They had previously
Moscow made
right. They previously said
goodwill.
We're leaving on purpose. As a show of goodwill,
but by the way, we still need to send drones in to blow up stuff we left behind because we were rushing out.
Right. It's
and then also
absurd.
subsequently, we have seen the Ukrainians get on boats and go out to Snake Island and raise the yellow and the blue flag. Yeah, which was a gutsy thing to do. Gutsy thing to do.
Yep.
And I'm sure it was only temporary and it was only symbolic, but.
Well, I would also say that if the Russians, I would argue that not that we need anything to put the lie to what they say ever, but if they strike the island because it's got a flag on it now, that will go even further. So by putting that flag there, it's flags are as all deference to Eddie Izzard. Flags were a warning sign. It was better than a head on a pike. It was less violent, but it was like, this is our ground. Don't come here. We're not going to litter the area with your dead, but just, we're claiming this. If you want to lay claim to it, let's talk, but don't do anything. Otherwise we go back to heads on pikes instead of flags. And that was how it was forever until, the flag was the new invention. Like, here's a nice way of saying we live here. Yeah. Peter's asking what's strategic about Snake Island. For the Russians, a lot. For the Ukrainians, just not having the Russians there, I would say. From that point,
Yeah, it's a good position to help in any kind of blockade of shipping coming out of Odessa in particular. It's for the Russians, it would be a good spot to put a missile battery. But aside from that, no. I mean, it's a tiny little island.
I heard, by the way, honking behind you, Philip. Clearly signs of a failed state. In deference to the storyline of MTG and Jimmy Dore, where they're literally saying that Ukraine is, and I quote, a failed state. The cartoonish level, by what you can say one thing about, like, you believe this is maybe negotiations and peace. That's the soft pedal version of that, where we should just be able to, let's just let Russia have what they have, and there needs to be peace so people aren't killed. And like, you can say that that's truly maybe the anti-war version, even though you're supporting ultimately the Russian acts of aggression in stages, because they didn't.
One of the most heartening things I've seen in the last week or so is the Ukrainians going into recently recovered territories or areas where they couldn't get to previously because they were still clearing them of unexploded ordnance, and going, one of the first things that they've been doing is going to senior citizens, to old age pensioners, and bringing in their pension, which is only like $100 or $200, but it's a world of difference for them. But they made a point, the Ukrainians made a point of, like, we haven't been able to get you your pension for the last 4 months because of the war. Now we are going to first and foremost make sure that you have money and food and all that kind of stuff. So that's not a failed state, And then,
they've also made their bond payments. And for the record, Russia has not. Russia defaulted on their bond payments for the first time since 1917. And Ukraine is still paying interest on the bonds that they have, and they will continue to once. And again, if I suppose if the other countries that are supporting them want them paid back, you would want them to win, because if Russia's going to not pay back Ukrainian war bonds, I suppose, or whatever they are. There's a high sign that would happen. Anyways, let's we can grab another question before we get to this break.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seattle Susie Q is asking, is Zelensky getting pressured to negotiate peace by giving up some land?
That exists. I don't think he's being overly pressured by Western powers. I have seen what I have seen in Western powers statements. Ultimately, it's up to the Ukrainians. I have seen it repeatedly. This narrative of like, ultimately, it is up to the Ukrainians to make that decision, and we cannot make that. And that is 100% the right way to do it, because this country has been a colony of other greater imperial powers for the majority of its history. And if we come in here and start treating this place like a colony and telling them what to do, they will not take it from Brussels. They will not take it from DC, just as they will not take it from Moscow. And we better wrap our heads around
again,
that.
I would like to say the only state giving them any such ultimatum. The argument. Yeah.
The arguments that we see of this whole, and this comes back to the Doors and the MTGs and all those guys. We need to make sure that these aggressive Ukrainians stop fighting, because inevitably Russia's going to win anyhow. So all you're doing now is just you're
prolonging the inevitable.
Life.
Right.
Well, I think if you ask the vast majority of Ukrainians in this country who are exhausted by this war, do not misunderstand me, but they will say to you, as tired as I am of this war, we would rather have a solid peace with a properly negotiated victory than a bad victory, with the acquiescing territory. So,
the other thing is
Ukraine's going to keep fighting.
If the idea that Russia could or should win in Ukraine and take over the country and make it a satellite state in many ways, is the second question that must follow that is, do you wish the same judicial system that is happening to Brittany Griner on every Ukrainian, or for that matter, every Moldovan, or eventually every Chechen or Latvian or Lithuanian, because that is what they have said their plan is. Yeah.
There's a professor out in Ekaterinburg who's just been sentenced to something like 17 years because he had the audacity to say that he didn't support the war. That was the only thing he said. He didn't want the war. And I saw a picture of him in the dock, because they put him in cages, and he's holding up a sign that says, "Do you still need this war?" Basically to the Russian people. And for that, he's going to go away for 17 years, hard labor.
And the idea that anybody, including Oliver Stone or anybody who says, and there's a great, the phrase I brought it up last week, America right or my country right or wrong, has been a kind of phrase that has been used as a jingoistic kind of phrase for a long time. But the actual phrase is, my country right or wrong, if right to be kept right, if wrong to be made right. And that is a uniquely that is unique to democracy, and it is specifically unique to the American ideal for a very long time. In Russia, that's not an option. My country right or wrong is literally, that's the choice they have. They don't have a choice to make it right. They don't have a choice to correct those wrongs. They're stuck with it. They have to, that patriotism is an enforced behavior, not a felt behavior in any way. And the fact that people have an option, again, to feel disenfranchised, to feel that they don't feel represented in a representative democracy, is the point, to some degree, of being in a democracy. That you can do something about it. You can get somebody elected. You can run yourself. You can voice those concerns. That guy is doing 17 years for holding up a sign. We can't even fathom that over here. And it's an absurdity to even suggest something like that would be a law over here. All the way across the spectrum in the United States. All the way across. Left to right, all the way across. That would be ridiculous. And that is the law in Russia. And to wish that on the Ukrainian people or the Lithuanians or the Georgians or anybody else is I think, a sign of cruelty. We'll be back right after this. It's the HAL Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
You guys hear Flora chiming in?
Yes, we did. I don't know if you noticed, but I put up one of the chats like, does somebody hear a cat? Yeah.
Some folks were asking about a post office for me. I think Amanda has my post office. I've got
I
a
thought
box.
you said that you couldn't get stuff over there.
Oh, conceivably yes, but I don't know how. And besides, I'm going to be out of here in about 3 weeks, and I don't think it would
Might take
arrive
a
in
while.
time.
Right. I would like to say, by the way, in the Twitch side of things, there is indeed a raffle going on for a free Zoltan hat that's going up there. So enter in there if you would like to do that. And I saw, Kale Link, that you did one of the raffles and you didn't get yours. I don't fulfill it. They do. So you have to follow the links that they send you when you won and get it. If for some reason it died or you didn't get it for some other reason, tell me what it was and I will figure out a way to send you one somehow, by hook or by crook. Again, this is one of the things that they offer on Streamlabs, and I like doing it. I liked doing it a lot more, but I finally figured out how to do it with some frequency. And on days like this, I'm trying to boost it to make it actually work because I think it's fun for folks. But if it's ever an issue, just let me know and we'll try and remedy it.
You made a good point about the legal system, though, in Russia. I mean, you talk about poor Griner. Brittany Griner. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how she pled guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Russian, in the court system, you're supposed to prostrate yourself in front of the court.
Right.
And so, I mean,
I don't think people recognize how big a deal innocent until proven guilty is in the United States.
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to play the happy song when we come back. We could?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Boy, time flew today.
It did.
Look at that.
I am happy, you are happy, let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky, let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. 'Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling, let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy.
No
I will
use.
still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Yay! So,
She's adorable.
Yes, she is. So, one of the, I've got two happy endings before we finish out with our questions for Philip Ittner on this, and he'll be joining us, I hope, Wednesday. I will be traveling Thursday, but we will be able to do the morning show, and hopefully he'll be able to join us. My two happy endings, besides the jobs numbers, which are fun because they're good for the country, but also because they make Fox News mad, is Johnny Million's shirt with his cat on it that has and I think he has his cat on his lap right now at the same time. No, it's a cat. No, she's in the other room.
I had to go try to chill her out.
Understood. And then, of course, the number of trolls we're getting, which proves we're actually having an impact. They're having to show up. I'm literally starting to chart on the pushback factor. It's so good. And it's a good way to know you're right. Okay, so other questions, and that Philip is with us yet again. And what other questions do we have there, Johnny Million?
All right, let's see here. From Michelle Crocker? This is a super chat. What are the chances of Ukraine winning this war? Are the Russians getting desperate?
I think the Ukrainians winning this war is not. I don't just think they have a chance. I think it's an inevitability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they are going to win this war because for them, just surviving is winning.
Right.
And when Kiev didn't fall, I think the die was cast.
Yeah.
They may lose Donbass. They may not get Crimea back. There's a number of factors that could happen. We have yet to see the counteroffensive. The counteroffensive is still coming. The will of the Ukrainian people to continue fighting is still very high. they will win this war. They will. Ultimately, the Ukrainians are going to win this war because there will be a country called Ukraine, and it will not be a colony of Moscow at the end of this. So,
Right.
Absolutely, they're going to win.
Just for the record, 4 of the HIMARS that the U.S. has sent have arrived already in Ukraine, are in use. 8 more arriving this month, and 8 more next month, at the first 2 weeks of August. With the 4 that they have, they destroyed 21 Russian ammo dumps, ammo sites in 72 hours.
Yeah.
That this break the Russians were counting on for regroup is timed incredibly poorly for refitting, because it means consolidation around certain points that they know are completely safe, where they can basically set up camp and fix these things, which makes them singular targets away from even Russian-leaning civilians in those areas. They're not going to just like fall back and have dinner at home or something under the illusion that they actually live in the Donbass. They have taken over facilities, sites, town centers, and turned them basically into impromptu military bases, and settling back into those places and distancing themselves from civilians because they don't trust those civilians. There was an outbreak in Donbass this week where Ukrainians were fighting from the center and claimed a piece of territory that was significant from the inside out. That was a first. And largely that has to do with the fact that they were getting cover from these HIMARS to start doing this. And there are increasing numbers of areas where that's going to happen. That once the counteroffensive happens, the eating from the inside of the area that's been claimed by Russia is going to be bigger, because
and they're going to be saboteurs. They're going to be saboteurs. They're going to be partisans. They're going to be guerrilla fighters. I mean, look at what's happening in Kherson already. You know, or in Donetsk, even in Donetsk, there's reports that they're citing these places, and that's how they're able to bring in the precision HIMARS, because they actually have people revealing where the Russians are hiding their ammo, and creating their storage dumps. So far in this war, it has been predominantly a conventional war. But there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that there will be saboteurs, partisans, guerrillas. That the Russians can take territory, but holding it is a very different thing.
Right. Johnny Million, another question?
Yeah. So EO over in Twitch wants to know if Brittany Griner will be used as a bargaining chip in the U.S. involvement in Ukraine.
I think absolutely. That's why they took her. I don't know if it will work, because then that just encourages them to keep doing stuff like that.
Right. And
I hope she gets home as soon as possible.
Right. And I do think she's to some degree safer than the other guy, who they are accusing of directly spying. Like he's in more material danger there than she is, because the problem with, with her, as racist and anti-LGBT as the Kremlin is, they do recognize worldwide. Even the people on Channel 1 have been talking about how isolated they are becoming from the world. And any chance, even if they claim the Donbass and say it's ours and now it's part of Russia and we're settling in and, before the next big weird push, if they're going to interact with the rest of the world, being seen as, that provocative in the world as far as playing that poorly with your neighbors in that regard and doing something awful to her, would not help them. It's the bargaining chip would be, she's being treated well, she's safe, and look, here she is, she's got a big screen TV in her cell, that kind of stuff. That's their best propaganda use of her time, until she's traded for at some point. The other guy, and I'm blitzing on his name right now.
Whelan?
Whelan, that's what it is. He, I almost said Wheeler. He's been accused of spying, and he's a
Marine.
Yeah.
And so, they say, but, look, it's absolutely right what the State Department is saying and what Biden has said. Americans should not be going to Russia right now. Absolutely, 100% not. I wouldn't step foot in Russia right now. And they could use my vlogs against me. Absolutely. they will continue to do this.
Talk about cancel culture.
I feel terrible for her. I feel terrible for her and for her wife. And I hope she gets home soon. I really do. But we can't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's such a desperate, awful situation. We can't just let them use her as a bargaining chip, because then they will just take another American.
Because the other thing they're not afraid to do is soft capture people from other countries that are traveling and say, well, this is Russian territory right now, so we just took them.
Well, they've already floated that idea. They floated that idea on Pier Canal about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. They said all these foreign dignitaries that are coming to Kiev, maybe one day they go to sleep in their sleeper car in their train, and they wake up instead in Moscow. And so saying basically, let's go and kidnap foreign dignitaries.
Let's kidnap prisoners to exchange on, for these things. And arguably that it shows more than ever, I think, how they've fallen into more of a North Korean system than even a Chinese system, where there is a lot of business back and forth, and they're trying to, create some kind of balance, as imbalanced as it is currently. I don't know why Russia has seen the North Korean business model as something to emulate, but maybe they think they don't have another choice at this point. But yeah,
audio real gurgly.
I think maybe she hopped on. No, somebody told me about the pronunciation of Kiev. Kiev.
Next week, and hopefully with a smoother system. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else.
Kiev. That's the Russian pronunciation. The Ukrainian is either Kiev. I've heard that out of a Ukrainian mouth.
We're going to continue this conversation online.
It is traditionally Kiev.
Okay, man, that was a tooth pull. I was trying to give Chicago that other, to bring them into WeChat. Listen to me, because I'm thinking about China. To bring them into the Ecamm software as a guest, which would make the audio easier to route to and from them without any kind of buckle. And they couldn't get it up and running because
they couldn't connect.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll do a test on it. It shouldn't be that hard. It should be the exact same system. They just have to okay it. Because I can do audio only guests on that, but whatever. Hold on one second. I'm going to, in the meantime, shut off all these.
Cat here, Hal.
Bring me back.
All
there
right,
we go.
so you didn't hear my explanation of the pronunciation of Kiev.
Can you hear me, Hal?
We've talked about it in the past. I think if you go back, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Hal, I need to go tend to Flora.
I understand. If you got a moment, Philip, I'll keep you on for a couple seconds, and we'll answer some questions. And before we'll let Johnny bow out early. Hold on one second. Let me
let me cut and paste the last questions I've got here.
Okay. Are you going to send them to me in there? Yeah, you can send them in the chat for the...
Yep, they're in the guest chat now.
Lovely. Okay, thanks so much, brother. Okay.
Love ya.
Bye. Cheers.
See you, Johnny.
Yeah. Yay, there he is.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, look at that.
Let me take a quick look at these.
So yeah, they'll be in the guest
From
chat.
Twitch, are there embedded reporters on the ground? Yes, there are. With Ukrainian troops. How many dead Putin generals? Last I saw, I think we're in the double digits.
Yeah, it's 14 that I saw confirmed last. I think it's 16 now. Let's see, Russian.
It sounds about right. I was going to say somewhere around the 16 mark.
Well, they've started.
If I'm a fan of this is Spinal Tap. Hey, my love for Spinal Tap goes all the way up to 11.
Let's see. That's March. Let me see if
there are post offices working just fine. Museums are hit or miss. Maybe I should have phrased that better. Intercity trains, yes, they're operating and they're running not completely throughout the country. Obviously, not into the Donbass or into the conflict zone. And for example, I had to when I was looking at coming back to Kiev from Odessa, there was only one train and it traveled at night, and I suspect that was because of security measures. So the war is affecting train travel, but by and large, things are operating relatively normal.
Mm-hmm.
How much of Ukraine is actually in ruins? Far more than should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be. I mean, I've seen figures, trillions. It's going to take to reconstruct Ukraine. So there's going to have to be a lot of investment.
Yeah, it's going to need to be a
also
Marshall Plan.
Russia's got to pay for some of this.
Yep. Last list I have was from June 6th, although there were others. Like the news is a bit shuffled around this. Because June 7th, 2 generals were killed in one day.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find the latest July numbers. But we're at least 16 now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of them was again that my favorite story of them is the one he was shot down flying a helicopter. The stories were from the Russians, like the telecom back and forth, that he was drunk at the time when he was shot down. He decided to do a buzz back. They'd shot something and then he buzzed back around to kind of you guys, and they shot him out of the air. And he was apparently a guy who, with a buddy of his, had stolen a MiG, effectively like a big fighter jet, not a MiG, but one of their big fighter jets that he had no right to be in, and he wasn't checked out on. They just took it for a joyride. He was demoted at that time down to, he lost his rank for a little while, but they gave it back to him right away. And he was drunk, and they destroyed the plane. They had to eject. And that's like a $24 million plane.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
When they are drunk. There's a real big problem with them getting drunk and doing stupid, well, we're off the radio, doing stupid shit.
Right.
I mean, how many videos have I seen of them just rolling around in tanks, doing donuts and stuff, which is terrible for your tank. Those tracks are not, you have to refit those things a lot. They're just bumbling through this country.
Article in the Daily Beast titled "Russian Troops Embarrassing Drunk Fest in Ukraine Prompts Alcohol Bans." Is literally the Kremlin had to issue a no drinking. Seriously, guys, no drinking. Which you do recognize that, like, other serious militaries don't have to do during wartime. Yeah. Like, you just snatch people up, and effectively it could be a reason for court-martial if you're found to be,
that's why we always use, when I was on an American military base in Afghanistan or Iraq, we would oftentimes try and sneak off to one of the Europeans, because the Brits are allowed two cans of beer a week. Mm-hmm. And the French get a rationing of red wine, being French, and the Italians as well. But we have General Order Number 1. General Order Number 1 in the United States military, when you are deployed, especially to a country that is Islamic and therefore doesn't drink alcohol, they are forbidden from drinking.
In Pakistan, I don't know if you heard this story. This is like, Pakistan's kind of a wreck right now. It's crazy. Like, it's not Sri Lanka bad, but it's getting close. And it's not even charting in the news over here. It's amazing to me, considering they're a nuclear power and they're, talk about a failed state. They're like teetering. They've been teetering for a long time, but this is really bad. They raided the Chinese embassy offices and the house of the Chinese ambassador because he was selling alcohol. He was hoarding alcohol from other, because they were allowed to have alcohol on the Chinese embassy grounds. So he was ordering more than he needed, and he was selling it in the history of Chinese guanxi and making money, in that kind of Russian style.
I lived in Pakistan for a year. I worked for Voice of America. And you can get alcohol if you're a foreigner.
Right.
But you have to have a special license and an ID for it. And there's a huge black market for alcohol in Pakistan.
The Chinese ambassador, and I want to say he was like the executive director assistant of the Chinese ambassador. The Chinese ambassador apparently never goes. It's the guy who's the effective Chinese ambassador there, because he's the one who lives there, was just basically running a liquor store out of his house and out of the Chinese embassy. And the Pakistani authorities raided the place. Like, what? Yeah. When's the last time? Think of a time, like we've had like Secret Service guys get caught messing around in countries and they get disciplined and it's a big scandal and but imagine an American embassy raided by the authorities because they are selling contraband.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. So right.
Karen Webster, I'm looking at the chat. Karen Webster, go back and try and watch the rest of Come and See. I know it is a very difficult movie to watch. It is one of the most horrible war movies I've ever seen, and it's a really hard watch. But boy, it's worthwhile, because it'll give you an understanding of what happened on this territory. Now that takes place in Belarus, not in Ukraine. But we have to remember, and Hal and I have talked about this many times, that this country has been traumatized for centuries, and not least of which during the 20th century. And so if you can give it another go, maybe take it in chunks, but Come and See will give you an understanding of why it is there's generational trauma in Ukraine, in this part of the European continent.
By the way, in looking for that Pakistan raid story, I didn't talk about it. I saw there was a news story this week that India raided the offices of a Chinese telecom company, Vivo, and effectively shutting them down because they were spying. They were effectively running, a spy ring using Chinese telecom. The same reason the United States doesn't want Huawei in the United States, because of the security breaches in there. The Chinese have had to, because a lot of countries cue off our concerns, like Israel and other countries aren't going to, if we kick out Huawei, we're late to the game most of the time. We're serious about the stuff, but we tiptoe around it for quite a while before we actually get through it. Look, TikTok is still standing, but but the rest of the world, like they go, if America hates it, it must be bad. if they're putting their foot down. We did that with Huawei. So China had to move through the other telecoms and start doing the same thing they were doing with Huawei. And in this case, in India, Vivo. And the Indian authorities are running constant investigations into, quote, Chinese firms, and warn the Chinese are warning that this will impede the improvement of the business environment in India, chills the confidence and willingness of other foreign nations' business to invest and operate in South Asian market following raids. No, it won't. As a matter of fact, everybody else will be more comfortable doing business in India if they don't think they're being spied on by the Chinese, because one of the reasons they're moving to India is because they're tired of being spied on by the Chinese. It's adorable.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story about Russians and booze if you want to hear it.
Yeah, sure.
When I was about 4 days after 9/11, the attacks of 9/11. Mm-hmm. I was living in Moscow, and I was working for CBS. And at the time, nobody could get into Afghanistan through Pakistan. You had to go through the north, because that was the only remaining area in Afghanistan not controlled by the Taliban. Mm-hmm. Now, to get into northern Afghanistan, what you have to do is you have to go to the Central Asian country of Tajikistan, where Russia had bases, still does. And you get a ride on a Russian helicopter, an old Mi-24 or something to that effect. And so the Russians had to fly you into Afghanistan. And we got on this helicopter. There were about 8 of us. and the two Russians could hardly stand up. They were swaying the entire time. They stank of vodka. And then as we're flying over the Hindu Kush, and maybe we're getting over the summit of these mountains by maybe 5 or 6 feet at most, and the air is really thin up there. So we're not getting, helicopters are not great for going over high elevation areas. Anyhow, so we're like just going over these peaks, and these guys are clearly drunk.
Right.
And then not only that, one of the pilots kind of gets up, and we're, as we're kind of clearing over the Hindu Kush, we're coming into land sort of thing. And he comes back and he sits on the fuel tank, this big yellow fuel tank that clearly says in Russian, "Do not smoke."
Right.
And this guy pulls out a cigarette and starts smoking on the fuel tank. And all of us, all of us in the back of the helicopter.
Guy learning how to rule.
No, you tell him not to do that. I'm not going to tell him not to do that.
Oh my God.
So they are very fatalistic, and they don't get them between them and their booze. They will do stuff like that. So I'm not surprised this general did that at all. I'm not surprised these guys are going on joyride, with tanks
with their
and
own
stuff,
planes,
all wasted.
Right. There was a, in Pakistan last year, August of last year, there was an attack in Karachi. Suicide bombers attacked specifically Chinese academics. And the Chinese academics thing was part and parcel to the Chinese system of like infiltration of U.S. and U.K. Universities with Chinese state activists who are put in there specifically to start building these like pro-China, pro-CCP organizations within the schools and that kind of stuff, and quite frankly put down stories about Tiananmen Square or any Chinese person who comes there and thinks they're still Chinese citizens, but when they're in the United States, they feel free to say what they want. These folks keep them from doing it. They warn them not to even try, that kind of stuff. And there's been some pushback in the United States that started. Chinese American communities especially are pushing back on this. It's nice to see, and it's a slow process because there's all this back and forth about because China is a namesake, is a country and a people. There's always this worry about talking about Chinese could be the country, the government, the race. That as racially homogenous countries, it's always hard to push back on things that they do because of the idea that it's racist towards the people, not the government, and the thing, whatever. Anyways, Pakistan, they don't care. And the LBA just has thought, oh, these people are coming in to try and teach our people this atheistic communism business that they're going to do. And the Islamic groups there, I think it's the SLA, just started killing them. And that's an ongoing thing here. That's happening throughout Africa. There's a bunch of these incidents happening because they think they're going to use the BRI as a way to pave through. And they believe, I guess, the hype around the British Empire stuff, that when the British Empire came in, as awful as they could be at times, they built stuff they intended to leave behind. That was different. It's an odd thing in history, but it's true that when in Africa, for example, to help stop the slave trade in Africa, the British went to the Sultan of Zanzibar and said, "We'll build a rail across your country so you can lower the amount of work and you won't need as much labor. So you have that, and you just stop participating in the slave trade. Stop selling people." And they're blockading boats and all that other stuff. At this point, the idea was, we'll leave this behind if you just quit it. And they did similar things in India. And again, not forgiving a lot of the stuff that they did where they were trying to seize territory, but this was part and parcel to it. Wholly different. There is zero evidence that the Chinese want to leave any of this behind. And as a matter of fact, if you look at Sri Lanka and the claim of that 99-year lease on the port there, they intend to take the country. They intend to eventually take all those places. And the idea that somehow Russia and China are now strange bedfellows that are going to get along when both of them are enacting a similar plan, the only thing I can take from it as far as what they must believe about each other is that Russia and China, that Xi and Putin in their personal conversations have done you take that part, I'll take this part discussion of the whole world.
And we have common enemy in America. Let's just put our differences aside, and let's
Right.
attack the West first. You know, we didn't even get a chance to talk about the G20 and what a debacle
Right.
that has been for
Oh,
Russia.
my-
And Lavrov rocking
Had to
up
leave early.
to
Right.
he had to leave early because he was getting, you know, insults shouted at him. And then on their, because I monitor all their social media stuff, because they will, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs
Right.
and the embassy in London and Maria Zakharova, who I know personally, and so I'm on Facebook with her, and I watch what they put out. And it was interesting to me yesterday that they did this whole thing about like, oh, and the West says that Russia is completely isolated. Well, does this look like we're isolated? And it was Lavrov sitting with different like delegations. But if you went and you looked at the pictures of the delegations, I mean, I don't want to insult anybody who may have heritage in various places around the world, but they were not exactly powerhouse nations.
Right.
I'll just leave it at that. But it is
Right.
that
Well,
kind of, and of course they hit up all the BRICS and all the rest of it, but they're still, you know,
They already
the
have those
G20.
relationships. They're not part. They're and effectively, quite frankly, I mean, I've said this for a long time. The idea that China has the world's second economy is I think on balance the same as the idea that Russia has the world's second biggest army or the biggest military. They're crap. Even though they're large, they're paper tigers largely. They're a mess. And the one thing I think the Ukrainian war has shown, especially about Russia's kind of standing, is that short of threatening the world with nuclear power, they are effectively powerless to extend real power in the world. If they did not have that threat, their tactical ability, their material ability would be non-existent, on par, or it'd be low. It's lower than Poland's. It's lower than Germany's. It's lower in, arguably, depending on how much, you know, like you could say they build stuff and sell it to North Korea, or they sell it to Iran, so they make more tanks and stuff than they need in theory most of the time. They still don't have as much functional stuff of their own that they have people trained up on to use. And like I said, look at the rusty barrels of the tanks that are getting blown up in Russia and tell me.
Well, and I would be willing to bet that the stuff that they sell for export is actually military, you know, systems and things that actually work.
Right.
Because they don't want to give the crap to their client states, because they want the client states to keep coming back, whereas they can skim they can skim off the top of the stuff that's just going to sit around in a warehouse or at some army camp somewhere in, you know, Rostov-na-Don.
That, I mean, again, I've been looking into Shoigu, that dude, over the last few weeks, and I mean, just a gross dude, and on so many levels.
They all are.
But the part about his 18-year-old daughter having an $18 million house outside of Russia that he lives in, but it's in her name because somehow that makes it okay, is just goofy. But the fact that as soon as this attention started getting paid to people, I think there was an article about it in early June, the records of sale have come offline. They've just evaporated. So that Russians inside are now, they're just tearing up their own legal documents, because and it's hard for people to, like, let's say Putin falls and we have another 91. We go through another 91 where people rush in to kind of fill the void, and they're like, we're opening or whatever. Nobody owns that dude's house. Like, you could just squat in it, I guess, because Russia has no record or won't keep a record of this guy's $18 million house. So it's like Chinese ghost cities or something. Like, nobody technically knows who owns them right now. Are the Russians reacting to the July 4 parade shooting? They play up that stuff a lot.
Yeah.
The rest of the world does. I mean, it's one of the things that they mock worldwide, except in places that have, you know, where you're like Yemen or parts of, you know, North Africa and places like that, where it's, you know, South Africa even. Countries where it's, you know, off the scale of that. And even still, the problem that I see with Russia as far as the gun thing, and Maria Butina is, the fact that she slept with the dude from, what was it?
The NRA.
Yeah, not just the dude from the NRA, the dude from Overstock, who was the Trump dude who was in the White House with him. She just magically has an affair with the CEO of Overstock. Like, what? Anyways, she was bringing groups of people from the NRA and the Republican Party to Russia for these big, like, pro-NRA things when they have none of those rights in Russia. There is no Second Amendment in Russia. And if Russia ever took over, or we had a government even remotely similar, it would be gone in a day.
Well, they know exactly what they're doing when they do stuff like that. They don't really care about the Second Amendment or Americans' rights to bear arms. It's just a way to attack us. It's the same thing I say all the time about them. They weaponize whatever division, whatever stress point exists between us internally within the United States, within the Western, community of nations. If they can find a wedge to drive between people, because their whole concept is divide and conquer, they don't care about the Second Amendment. They don't care about the African American community in the United States. They don't care about the rule of law. Frankly, they bang on and on about the rule of law. Mm-hmm. They don't have it in their own country. Right. So it's all just a device to attack the West. So I don't.
And again,
when they get critical about us, I usually either just shrug it off or just recognize it for what it is, and it's just weaponized information.
By the way, Spice Girl 6, you won the hat. I'm just saying, in the raffle. It just ended. So congrats and thank you. I didn't want to drag it on.
I'm trying to read the chat as best I can without my glasses because people are getting frustrated with me taking it off and putting it back on. Somebody asked how I'm doing on a personal level. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. I'm holding up. It is time for me to get back to the States for a little bit. So I welcome this. Right. This brief trip back, and then I'll come back here, and I'm actually looking at maybe setting up a proper studio, TV studio. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if maybe we can do that, and then do like roundtable discussions and things like that. We'll see. I don't know. Early days. Right.
Robin Blade saying Hunter's laptop is propaganda from Fox News. I would argue it is propaganda directly from Russia. It is interesting to me, and watch as stuff rolls out, that there was in a laptop that maximum had a hard drive that could hold 250 gigs. There are 416 gigs of data on the hard drive that Rudy Giuliani has been shopping around, and that's even if you unzip all the zips, I call BS. Secondarily, I would say that basically they used it for every piece of compromising catch-all that they could use and manipulate, both real and deep fake that they mixed together. And they're slow rolling the release of embarrassing stuff, but not germane to anything. Like the stuff that came out about Hunter Biden this week, I think proves that Joe Biden is a good father who cares for his son, because it's literally the story in the Daily Mail is, here's this picture of right after he asked his dad for money for rehab, here he is smoking crack in a thing, which nobody knows it's crack, but they put crack in quotes so they can, because it's the Post, it's Rupert Murdoch. But the idea is that he was supposed to be in rehab, and he's asking his dad for money for rehab and going through all this stuff, and his dad gave it to him. Well, his son is alive, has beat his addiction, and is stable now. That's what you want for your child, your son, especially when they've gone through the trauma of, their own marriage failing, their brother dying of brain cancer, their own drug addiction. Again, these people all want to follow Mike Pillow into hell, but somehow Hunter Biden's a mess. But the Hunter Biden laptop, I will remind everyone, does not exist. It's not a real thing. But the hard drive that they've been shopping around is effectively a compromat hard drive put together by Russians that they were selling in Ukraine. That was the meeting point. That Rudy Giuliani came in. They were offering to sell it on the black market. Word was that it was $3 million. Rudy paid $5 million because his boss wrote the art of the deal. And he brought it back and he started copying it and sending it around to everybody. And it allegedly includes compromising pictures of underage girls, which means, yes, Rudy Giuliani, who just got stents put in his heart this week because apparently someone clapped him on the back. I'm kidding. It's because he eats garbage and smokes cigars all the time and never moves and is basically slovenly.
And drinks like a fish.
Yes, and drinks like a fish. Has been selling and disseminating what is effectively child pornography. There you go. Congrats, Rudy. You've broken that singular law. And to Letitia James or anybody in her office, I would like to say, can we just go with the stills that are faked on that thing that don't have even Hunter Biden in them, that are supposed to be just pictures of underage girls that Rudy Giuliani himself has said are on there? Giving them to law enforcement is fine, but copying them and giving them out to media and other people is technically the dissemination of that material for material gain. It's a contribution in kind to a campaign, but it's also he's getting paid to engage in this stuff. As Rudy's lawyer theoretically, as Trump's lawyer theoretically, but on his own as well. And that's against the law. So that alone should be enough to do those things. Now, it pops up every time we get a good jobs report number.
And it stinks of the GRU.
Oh, it's
and
terrible.
Once you start, I had a conversation last year in London with a very close friend of mine. He's a Georgian, Soviet Georgia, not Atlanta.
Right.
And he was actually an intelligence officer in the Soviet Union. He's old enough that he was at the tail end of the Soviet Union. And we were sitting down in London having a drink together, and he said to me something that clicked in my brain. He said, once you start seeing it, you can see it from miles off.
Right.
Once you start
recognizing the
way the Russians, their MO and the fingerprints that they have on things, you start to see it really easily and really clearly. I mean, when that laptop story started dropping, I was like, that sounds like the GRU all over the place.
Totally. And that's why the 50 intelligence guys all wrote that letter going, that's what this is. I mean, come on, stop playing stupid. So look, Hunter Biden had an addiction. He was also more than likely given honeypot job offerings that and was given jobs that he genuinely had value in, especially like at Burisma, where again, corrupt company for a long time, and investors wanted to invest in oil and gas, but they didn't want the money to go right out of their pockets and straight to Russia. That's what it kept doing. So having the former vice president's son there means that at least one of the three guys working at Rosemont Seneca can't disappear and start living high on the hog in Russia like the other people who had run investment schemes going into Russia. The money is there to be made, but we don't trust anybody. And at least this dude, if his dad ever wants to be president again, or if he's actually a man of his word, or if actually he wants to honor his own legacy as, after he's been vice president, that won't happen. That idea. And it's exactly what happened. I've said this many times on my show before when this story started coming out, but let's say I have a gun to your head and I say, you have $10,000 that you have your life savings. You must invest it. Do you invest it in Burisma before Hunter Biden is there or after? That's the question. Easy choice. Easy choice. Because not only will you survive by betting on the second choice, you'll make money. You'll get your money back plus, a profit. Because that's what they ended up doing.
If you do business in Russia or with Russians, you're just corruption is part of the system.
It's baked in.
It's baked in. It's baked in.
Same thing. Well, in China, that's what they call guanxi. Right. They call guanxi right now. Which is basically you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That there's we have this agreement that's above and beyond whatever contract we have. That's how the rest of it is, and that's kind of fine in terms of favoring on a personality level. You make bread and you make sure your bread is delivered to the nice guy in the shop as opposed to the jerk you have to sell to make your bottom line. You're going to drive the truck by that guy's house first because he's his business, because he's a good dude. And it's warm and it's fresh and it won't make a big difference. But to you, it's like, screw that guy. But you still stay in business. And the problem in China, it has to do with these local provincial governors and how they create bonds and how they sell and resell property and how they sell and resell now grain, which is one of the big things. The idea that all these stories about how China has stored half the world's grain. They've got half the world's grain in storage. They've got 2 years worth. So if they attack Taiwan, they got plenty of food. They don't have to worry about anything, which is garbage because they have to buy all our pork because they had to kill all their pigs. They've nowhere near the amount of food. They import 80% of their food, 85% of their energy. They're dead in the water in 3 months if they mess around with any of the stuff. They don't even have the Russian backup. Far too many people, far too much land, too many problems already to solve this that Russia didn't have at this point. So the overall, the idea that China's got Russia's back or that this is somehow a working model is absurd. And I think they're looking at how Russia's being treated in the world because of Ukraine and going, you know what? This is bad. This is like, this won't help us.
Which is just another reason why we need to keep supporting Ukraine.
That's right. And yes, and Wes, thank you so much, brother, for the support today. It's really appreciated for the subs and it's just great to see. It means a lot. And we are obviously punching above our weight in terms of the interwebs when you've got people like Tim Pool and Jimmy Dore who have about 1 million subscribers, and TYT that has their 3, and Russell Brand who has his 5. And here I am humping along with 36, but somehow mine are real. So we're making more of an impact. I think that's partially why. I mean, why would you even bother to knock down a station with less than 250,000 subscribers unless it was actually making a change? And I thank you guys for being with me during this, and thanks to Philip for being with us to kind of carry part of that message from Ukraine to you guys. Yeah.
I'll keep doing it as long as you want, as long as the audience wants it.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Malcolm Nance is selling a book, and I'm going to let you go too because it's nighttime. Look at that. Look at that.
Yep. You want to take a look?
Yeah. I got to say,
they're not lighting up the market like they used to.
Right. Of course.
I don't think that has anything to do with the war. I just think they're not doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
somebody had asked what that's the central market in Kiev called Bessarabsky Market, and it's a great place to go buy fresh produce and fish and pickled stuff.
Everything. We can pickle that.
Pickled everything.
We can pickle that.
Yeah, we can pickle that.
Right.
I have actually in my refrigerator right now. They do a thing called Cherim Shah, which is basically garlic stalks. Mm-hmm. So the stalk that sticks out of the garlic above ground, they will chop that off and pickle it, and it's delicious.
Oh,
Cherim
wow.
Shah.
You're not making any friends, is what you're telling us.
Oh no,
Yes.
no smooching after that.
That's right.
But,
if they have some, it's okay, because that's the rule with garlic. That's the rule my girlfriend and I have about garlic. As long as we're both having it, we won't smell it. It's not a big deal. Right. Anyways, everybody saying good night and stay safe. And
thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope I was informative. And go check out my vlogs.
Yes, you always are.
I'll see you on Wednesday, Hal.
That would be great. Thanks,
be great. Everyone.
Take care. Be safe.
Right.
And we'll talk to you soon. Yes. Slava Ukraine.
Thanks.
Okay. Cheers. There he goes. It's I have to say, it's been a very special thing doing my radio show and being able to have my friend from high school, Johnny Million, who, we were in our first band together, and he's been just a great friend for so many years, and having him on my radio show regularly over these last few years is it's heartwarming. It's fun. It's a great thing. He gave me a sounding board because I drink news from the fire hose, and he sips from it, and there's a balance to be had there that's helpful, and yet his moral and ethical instincts around a lot of the stuff are spot on. So it's terrific in that regard. And then to have our new friend Philip, who I feel like I've become very fond of Philip as a human being, as have many of you. I genuinely consider him a brother in this world after him being on there. It's just great. And that is, I think, the one distinction I will say, as much as I am learning on the fly about building a show like this and the people in the chat and the ongoing kind of give and take of how much time I can spend, dealing with the chat and still do the show, or on my offline time, how much information I have to absorb to be useful and functional and funny with you guys on the regular show, and trying to work that emotional balance out. Because I feel like, I in my mind, how you always picture. You ever see Mitchell's versus the Machines? It's a kid's movie. My kid loves it, and we watch it together sometimes. It's about this family that fights back against this robot uprising. But there's this perfect family that they kind of envy, and that in the end, this family, by the way, is still perfect in their own way. But the imperfections is what makes the Mitchells win. Ultimately, it's pretty great. But yeah, it's like the people in the Pottery Barn catalog just have their shit together. And I know what you're thinking. There are no people in the Pottery Barn catalog. Exactly. Because apparently no human lives in a situation where they have a wonderful white couch with a draped throw rug that's perfectly situated on the corner and one magazine. Those people, I just don't get it, like how people live like that. And I try, don't get me wrong. Aesthetics, I love them, but I usually collapse under function. And I imagine that there are YouTubers out there who spend all their days on their Discords and in their chat rooms being able to engage with the people that they have. But the numbers that they have, I know that's an impossibility. I call hooey. And I think more often than not, they have teams doing this because it's just not materially possible. And so not that lets me off the hook in my own eyes, but that's the balance I work with, being interactive with you guys as a group, as a chat, and trying to be as personal with as many of you. And I see a lot more of the chat than I'm able to respond to, and I read a lot more of the chat than I'm even able to integrate into the conversation. And I want you guys to know that it would be an impossibility to factor it all in. And much of what you're saying, I take to heart, and I recognize, even if and when I disagree with it, tactically or what have you, it factors into how I explain what I'm talking about, the clarity with which I want to present my solutions when I have them for things, or my explanations for things when they are needed of geopolitical and domestic issues and politics and that like. And I just want you guys to know that. It's important for me to say that. And I don't always get to say it because we're always rushing, and especially on a day when I'm dealing with the tech aspects, maybe it's closer to the front of my mind because I don't feel like I can pay as much attention as I would even want to normally. So that said, I'm going to let you guys go. And the Trump rally, there was one yesterday, and there's one this afternoon. He's doing it again. I mean, they're not so much rallies anymore. They're kind of petering out. And the one yesterday, people have been posting clips, so I've been able to read some of the stuff about it, but I haven't watched it yet because I think it is worth doing. Dragon, we're not Russian. Yes, this is true. Some trolls are, but yeah, the vast majority of the trolls that we have are just deluded by the Russian message, I would say, misguided. So thanks, EO, for coming back. We appreciate it. Trump is always in Alaska. That's why they were talking about Alaska. I see. So anyways, I just wanted to say that about you guys. And I feel like I want to cover at least one of them just to see the state of decay in the Trump messaging world, because boy, is he scared. And boy, is it obvious. The sweaty freak out of Don Jr. this week in and of itself, and the whole like, look at Hunter Biden, like the amount of focus they've been doing on that, again, to me is indicative of how freaked out they are. Because as everybody who has a parent knows, but they is not an answer. If you're my kid, but they is not an answer. Because especially if you're an adult or you have intentions of presenting yourself as an adult, the but they part does not work. And both sidering is a cheap, crappy political version of but they. All right, now I'm going to turn it into a Midwestern goodbye. It just happens when I'm in the Chicago situation. I adore you guys, and I will let you go. And I'm going to see if I can. I got an hour to spend fixing the audio situation so that at least if Chicago isn't able to use the new system, I can at least get under the hood and start trying to fix this some other way. You guys are awesome. I will see you soon. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. Okay, bye. It's me. There's my music. Hopefully that doesn't sound like crap. And then off we go. Thanks for your support. Thanks, Wes, again. And thanks, everybody, for the super chats. Thank you for being patrons if you are. It means a lot and it'll help us travel. If you can support the show, please do. If you can't, thank those who do. That's all I ask. Thanks, guys. Thank you again, Hal Bakery.